So I would just like to welcome everyone to, I think now this is our 12th coffee talk that we're hosting here at the MSBA. We have gathered together almost, I think at this point, 270 members over the last few weeks, over the last month really, in these chats. And it's really nice to bring together two sections today, the elder law section and the military and veterans section. And really these talks are a more informal way for us to get together. We are recording this so that we can then just share this out with the section, and we also provide a brief summary. We'll send you also a copy of the chat, which is located in the upper right corner. You'll see a little chat box, so you can feel free to chime in with any comments or questions here. If you're unable to chat, or if something strikes you while we're in the middle of a conversation, you can post any questions, resources there. And we would just ask that if you're not speaking, just mute, and then feel free at any point to jump in and join in the conversation. We have a few directors that are here on the call, and we'll start off by just going through a few updates from what the MSBA has been doing. And I'd like to start just by acknowledging the thousands of you that have joined us in these last few weeks. And we've had over 20 webinars. We've had several town halls with section chairs and specialty bars, and virtual section meetings and coffee talks as we're having today. And we have used the opportunity of COVID to really advocate on your behalf and to connect with the local leaders, including the Maryland and federal judiciary. We've shared over 180 questions with the Maryland judiciary and shared responses with all of you as well, with what has been going on and what their plans are for reopening. We've also been closely working with the Governor's Office of Legal Counsel to understand the orders that are coming out and interpreting in the interpretive guidance. We also hold calls every week with several of the largest firms in Maryland and discuss how they have been coping with the COVID crisis. And we also have a partnership with the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. And I'll ask our legislative director, Richard Montgomery, who's on the call, to give us more details about this advocacy.
Thank you, Charlie. Good morning, everyone. My name again is Richard Montgomery. I serve as Legislative Director for the MSBA. My principal activities over the last few weeks have been working with the sections on a couple of key executive orders, the first being the remote notarization executive order, which basically is a scaled-down version of a bill that passed back in 2019, which unfortunately had an effective date of October 1st, 2020. So it wasn't in effect when the pandemic hit. And recognizing the need for notarizations to continue, even under a stay-at-home order, the governor sped up basically the effective date of that act via executive order. A slightly similar executive order was one that authorized remote witnessing, especially in connection with estate planning documents. Both executive orders, like most executive orders, were pretty broad. So what ended up happening is the Governor's Office of Legal Counsel had to issue interpretive guidance to sort of fill in the gaps of what they meant by certain things. And I suspect that's probably going to happen with the executive order that was issued yesterday, that basically brought on phase one of the reopening of Maryland and allowing for local jurisdictions to leave their restrictions in place if they deem that wise, which I think a couple of jurisdictions are certainly going to do. We've also been a key partner in the Maryland Chamber of Commerce COVID-19 work group, which meets, in fact, it meets right after this call. A lot of the businesses were heavily involved with trying to participate in the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP program, as well as the EIDL program. Those programs were moving so quickly that it was hard to keep the membership apprised as to every twist and turn that was going on with those. But we're doing our best with that. The other thing that the small business community is especially concerned about at this juncture are issues concerning employer liability and employee rights with the reopening. So there are going to be a number of issues that you'll be hearing from us on related to those issues. We also ask that if sections have any legislation that they require as an emergency measure, should there be a special session, to let us know as quickly as you realize that there's a need for it. But with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Shally.
Thank you, Richard. We've been keeping all of you updated with a COVID-19 website that we created from our MSBA page. We launched that when the crisis began on March 13th, Friday the 13th of this year. We've been updating that regularly, and it's a nice place to find a variety of resources, whether it's related to your business and your practice. We have a lot of health and wellness resources there. We have court updates, and we have health updates as well. So we encourage you to look there for information. I'll turn now to Andrea Terry, our Director of Learning, to give us an update about the webinars that she's put together for the MSBA.
Thanks, Shally. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see everybody, if just virtually. As Shally mentioned, we've since mid-March done about 20 webinars with 10 sections or so. And elder law was one of the first to step up, one of the first to go, and I really appreciate Morris Klein taking the lead on that. Between March and now, we've had about 15,000 viewers between the folks who have joined us live, both members and non-members, for these webinars. And really our website, our COVID website, is getting a lot of traffic, and a lot of those videos are being viewed after the fact by the hundreds. So Morris is also going to kick off our new CLE year in July with Hot Topics in Elder Law, as he does every summer. And so I appreciate his leadership on that program as well. So you should see information coming soon on that. And we've also opened up our on-demand catalog to lawyers, both members and non-members, until the end of June for free. So that's 150 plus on-demand educational sessions that you can access. And that coupon code goes out weekly in our Learn From Home email, and is posted on our website. And so I encourage you all to take advantage of that through the end of June. So if you've identified challenges to your practice area and we haven't done a webinar or presentation to address that, please reach out to me via email. We're happy to put together content around any issues that you're finding to be challenging, and get that information out as quickly as possible. So thank you all for your support. And as I said, it's great to see you all this morning. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrea. We've certainly increased our communications to all of you during this time. We generally had an e-weekly that would go out once a week, and we've now increased that to twice a week, the first coming out on Tuesday, and then a weekly roundup on Friday that has more summaries and content about what the MSBA has been doing, as well as links to other resources and content. We have made a decision for the upcoming Bar Journal to distribute that digitally. And we made this decision, instead of printing this session, we decided, given the health concerns, that that would be the best route to take. But we do have a lot of really good content, COVID related and otherwise. So we are hoping to send that out to all of you soon. And we will also make that available to the entire profession at this time. We continue to work on our publications, and we have just released our ESI title. This is available through our website, and all of these titles are available both in print and digitally. We communicated to you at the end of April that we had to make the difficult decision to cancel this year's Legal Summit and annual meeting. And it was a difficult decision, but we think it was the right one, given what Governor Hogan and local health officials were saying and what we were seeing from other bars across the country that had summer programs planned. And when we made this decision in March, at that point, we were on track to exceed the registrations and attendance For this summer, we had 80 plus programs and multiple learning tracks. So we were disappointed that we had to cancel that event, but we are working on putting together what we're calling Legal Excellence Week for late fall of this year, likely not in Ocean City, but likely in Montgomery or Prince George's County. And certainly anything we plan is with an eye towards health and safety, and only moving forward if that is deemed appropriate for everyone. But the idea is to take a lot of our fall events that we traditionally have, such as our Advanced Learning Institutes, the Family and Criminal Law updates, the Solo and Small Firm Summit, as well as the Conference of Bar Presidents, and to combine that with some of our social programs in the evenings and lunchtime, whether it's a networking event or a keynote speaker that we had planned for another session. We want to put all of that together into a week of programs, and you could certainly attend all of it. You could do a la carte or attend a few sessions. And the idea is to try to capture, just over 1,000 people, what we had expected at the annual meeting through this fall event. So we will continue to plan that, and we'll message out more to you as we know more. We've also decided to work on packaging a lot of the learning programs that we had scheduled for the summer annual meeting into a digital series. And we will also communicate that out to you, and we're hoping for that to begin over the summer. If these sections have any ideas as well for Legal Excellence Week, whether it's a social event or something substantive, please do let me know, or contact Doris or Angela, and we'll be sure to incorporate that into our planning. I'll turn over now to Lisa Kaplan, who is director of our Lawyer Assistance Program, to give us an update.
Thanks, Shally. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see everyone. We have a health and wellness page that you can access through the main COVID page. There's a lot of great information on there. There are tip sheets, there's yoga workouts, there's home workouts, there's self-help videos. We have a great program we did, midday reset that we did, that is on there. So please check it out. It's really important to take care of yourself during this time. We also have the support group that meets every Wednesday at 2. And we talked this week about procrastination and how that increases anxiety. Last week, we talked about resilience. That's going to run till the end of May. And also, don't forget about the Lawyer Assistance Program, which is available to help with any type of personal issues. It's free, it's confidential, it's a counseling program. It's available to all lawyers in Maryland, and we have a statewide network of counselors. So when we are able to get up and move around, you can meet with somebody that is close to your home. You can also make a referral if you are ever concerned about another attorney. This will not get them in trouble. You may actually save somebody's life. You can call me, and you can be completely anonymous and let me know what your concerns are, and we will reach out to that person to make sure that they are safe. We also have financial assistance for substance abuse and mental health. So if you are in weekly counseling, if you're having a hard time paying for that, we are able to help with that. If you need to see a psychiatrist, if you need substance abuse treatment, so whatever the issues are, we're able to help with that. And if you have any questions, please give us a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
I can tell you that I used it once. It was really good. And it was a district court event. And the bailiff told me the lawyer had been drinking. And he was a very prominent lawyer in our county. In fact, he was our then congressman's partner. And I picked up the phone, and just as you said, it all worked out. And it was a really good thing, and probably ought to mention that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think people are hesitant sometimes, but please reach out and share with them, talk with me. And again, you can be completely anonymous.
Thank you. And I think especially too, Lisa, in this remote environment, when people can feel even more isolated, that it's certainly important not only to know this number, but to share it with your peers and anyone else, so that we can all check in as needed.
Absolutely.
Thanks. We've also been working with our Access to Justice partner. They have been putting together a COVID page as well that's available on their site. And that's really geared at helping civil legal aid organizations that are on the ground, that are working remotely and still having hearings, and also to provide information to the public on issues that seem to change very frequently as this pandemic continues, whether it's immigration, landlord-tenant issues, domestic violence proceedings. So they continue to update their site. with a lot of helpful information, and that's also free and available to anyone that clicks on their site. They have been meeting weekly with civil legal aid organizations. They've been very focused on a public information campaign, just getting the word out there as to what resources are there, what issues are coming up. They have focused on ensuring funding for legal organizations for this year, given the pandemic. And they've also been trying to collect volunteer attorneys and establishing protocols for disaster legal services, if that's needed. So all this is to say that we've been busy working and supporting you, and we're always glad to hear from you about what you need, what's working for you, what's not working, and what we can continue to do. So we would ask you just to please reach out to us at feedback@msba.org, or you can reach out directly to any of us that are here on this call or on the staff, and we would welcome a conversation. And I'd also remind everyone to you should have received by now information about our renewal season, which we've just kicked off. And it's been nice to see so many of you that have responded. But we are really hopeful that everyone can just go on the site, renew. It only takes a moment, and doing it online, paying by credit card, just making a really easy transaction, especially as the mail is challenging during these times. It would just be really wonderful, and it's a nice way not only to obtain the resources that you need, but to help out and support the bar and your peers. So we would ask all of you to do that if you haven't already. And we have a new all-access membership that we're offering this year called the MSBA Passport, and it is, as I said, all-inclusive. You will receive the cost of your dues for the upcoming year. It also includes your registration for 2021 annual meeting. It offers you a lot of CLE options and complimentary access to the Solo Summit and other networking and substantive events. So please do check that out. That information, again, is on msba.org/renew. So with that, I see we have a good number of people on the call. And Angela, I see there's a lot of chats. Can you fill me in and let me know if there's any messages to respond to?
Nope, I just...
You've been taking care of it?
I've been adding the links to for the COVID pages.
Okay, wonderful. And Angela, I saw you also posted the CLE coupon code. And again, we just encourage all of you members to distribute this widely and let people know that all of this information is available through June 30th. I'd like to now turn it over. I think we have Morris here on the phone. And if you'd like to give an update on the section and what you've been working on, that'd be great. And I think you may be on mute, Morris. I'll give him just a moment. But I also see that from the Veterans Law Group, we have Judge Becker. Judge Becker, could I ask you to jump in right now and offer a few words on the section and say hello to everyone?
Sure. First of all, good morning. It's nice to see everyone, even though you're there virtually in this situation. We're basically, obviously, in a transition mode. We had a number of events that were scheduled May through July that have obviously been canceled, in-person events. And the first one was a panel discussion centering on mental health and veterans courts that we were doing in conjunction with the Partners for Justice. It was going to occur in Baltimore City. It would have been today, as a matter of fact. That, of course, has been canceled, but we're early in a planning mode to perhaps do something along those lines. It may not be quite the panel format that was planned, perhaps in an August timeframe with Partners for Justice. That may be something we could also do in conjunction with a webinar or something along those lines. That's in the early stages. One or two panel members are not members of our section, so we still need to do some coordination with that. The other thing that was canceled was our June 5th Veterans Conference at the University of Baltimore Law School. Hugh McLean is not on this call. I think he had a prior conflict, but that was and that in essence was going.
Judge Becker, I think that you just went on mute. If you could unmute again.
You're right. It did. I wasn't. I was once told I had bad mouse technique, but that was not a product of me hitting the mouse. At any rate, we were going to do at the summit. One of the aspects was going to be a presentation involving family law and particularly guardianships, which I want to get into at the end of this in terms of the COVID situation. But we were going to concentrate to a degree on guardianships. A lot of soldiers deploying or who are subject to quick deployment, particularly if they're single parents, need to have a guardianship. They need to have a deployment plan, which would include guardianships. And as I understand it, even if they're not deployed at the moment, they can set up I think a springing a guardianship that would take place in the event of a quick deployment. I just mentioned that from the military side. We're going to do a number of other things on the what used to be the Soldiers and Sailors Civil Relief Act and aspects that would that particularly would affect the military. Certain things going back to the Veterans Administration side. There was a lot of concern with our section of folks who are entitled to getting SSI benefits. If they didn't file tax returns, how they were going to get paid. I believe that's been worked out, but I'm not 100% sure. That we signed a letter supporting a mechanism to facilitate those folks who don't file tax returns getting their payments. I'm told that that's is working out. There were some deadlines in the middle of May, which changed some aspects of that, which we got information out to our section members, and you know, we'd be looking forward certainly to participating in the Legal Excellence Week. I just would like to mention while I'm on here about guardianships in this time of COVID-19, and just remind those that are on here, and you may want to pass that along, that there are emergency protective proceedings that are already established in the states and trust. And you know, this has become a concern, particularly with folks who have family members in nursing homes and want to get them out of that, perhaps get them out of that situation, or the reverse of that, of folks coming down with a virus and they want to get them into that situation. There may be a need for guardianship of person or property. But, you know, it's essentially covered in the States and Trust, Section 13709. And the courts are geared up. I know I was over Howard County yesterday, Circuit Court, talking to the guardianship judge. And, you know, they're doing these, obviously, virtually. They've not had one where there's been any requirement to have the disabled or the lawyers there in person. Which in normal times, oftentimes, you know, there's an attempt to get the disabled to appear in court in person, et cetera. But there are procedures set up for that, and you know, there's needs to coordinate with the hospital. Obviously, those deal with folks who are at substantial risk of you know, of life, and family members inquiring about how to do that, et cetera. So the courts, as I understand it, are geared up and have been doing those on an emergency basis, et cetera. So I just mentioned that. With that, that's basically what I would have at this point.
Thank you, Judge. Richard, could I just turn to you for a moment? I know you had mentioned you've been working with estates and trusts on a lot of these remote witnessing and remote notary tools. Could you give these two sections here an update about what they're working on now and how you know, the profession is thinking about addressing some of these concerns?
Well, thank you. What happened with the remote witnessing issue was a little bit different from what happened with remote notarization. As I mentioned earlier, there was a bill that authorized remote notarization. However, there had been a bill in that very same year that prohibited remote witnessing. It was actually sought by the Estates and Trust section at the time because it seemed like a good idea to really take a process and to really get a handle on issues related to undue influence. But at the time that they requested that prohibition, nobody anticipated a pandemic in the not too distant future. Because the one group that was putting that idea for a prohibition forward, the fact that they were asking for it to be rescinded in response to the pandemic made it a lot easier for the governor to go ahead and sign the executive order. The biggest issue right now is people are having a little bit of difficulty with mechanics of how to do this. So there's been a lot of chatter on the listservs, basically going back and forth in terms of what vendors do you use. Are people having difficulty hearing me?
Yes.
Huh. Okay. Well, I haven't.
Richard, maybe you could post in the chat a few thoughts, and then maybe I'll continue, and then we can come back and see how your connection is doing. But thank you for the updates, and I know you have a lot of good information to share. So maybe if you could post in the chat. I see Kathleen, you're here. Would you like to say hello and give any updates as well?
This is Morris Klein. I'm off mute now, so.
Okay, well, we'll go to Morris then. Thank you, Morris. So we did want to turn to you, and Kathleen, I'll come back to you in just a moment. Go ahead, Morris.
So first of all, I want to thank MSBA for all its work during the crisis. It's been extremely helpful in helping us navigate through these difficult times. I also would hope that maybe you go back to Zoom, which is more intuitive than Google. So as Richard Montgomery was mentioning, one of our frustrations have been getting documents signed, both wills being signed as well as notarizations. Particularly the notarization process is quite cumbersome going through these intermediary organizations, and at least I have not found it a satisfactory way to get documents signed, and hope we can come up with a better solution. Perhaps there needs to be a better legislative fix in the next session to improve this remote notarization process, because it is remaining a source of frustration. The remote will signing is not quite as challenging, but it still does present some hurdles. So one of the things that we have been concerned about, as I just mentioned, is getting documents signed. There is a greater interest now in people having wills and powers of attorney and health directives signed. So that's something that we have been working on. The other area we've been working on is ensuring the public benefits for people who are in nursing homes and getting home care. Things that we've been working on for a long time, as the VA chair mentioned, was getting people into home and community-based settings. And we've been dealing with the legislature and the health department on that for a number of years. And we hope that we will continue to make progress, particularly as people now see nursing homes are not just necessarily the safest places to live in. Half the deaths in Maryland have been in nursing homes. So that is an area of great concern. Related to that is the tension between keeping people in institutions safe versus the need to visit with loved ones and have loved ones visit them. And that's been another area of concern for us. So we just continue to soldier on in dealing with some of these challenges. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Morris. Kathleen, would you like to add to the discussion here? I think you're on mute, Kathleen. Thanks.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. And it's nice to see everybody. Just a couple of things. Lou covered pretty much of what we were all doing, or not doing, really. And one quick addition to all of that, which probably doesn't surprise anybody, we also did not have our motorcycle ride, even though we thought it was perfectly obvious that you're social distancing when you're on a motorcycle, but just kidding. So we're looking a little bit into perhaps doing that in the fall as well. And just to add to what Morris was saying, and this may not be something that everybody is always aware of, but I have a developmentally disabled daughter, and the developmentally disabled or disabled communities, residential communities, deal with many of the same things that that nursing homes and assisted living situations deal with. And I ended up bringing her home for keep her safe. And so I was very gratified that somewhere along the line, I think the governor pulled that topic into the discussion of nursing homes and assisted living, just to make sure that that doesn't fall off the grid. Other than that, I guess we're all looking to fall. That's it. That's
Thank
all.
you. Thank you, Kathleen. I see we have a few comments here. I would just like to acknowledge that Richard has talked about some of the qualified vendors. That's been a concern for both remote notarization and witnessing. And he mentioned 3 that he'd heard positive things about: notarize.com, notarycam.com, and docverify.com. He's heard good things. Again, he hasn't personally used them. So if anyone else has any comments, feel free to chime in. And regarding Zoom, Andrea from our team, she has mentioned here that we will be using Zoom to stream our CLE programs beginning in June. So right now we're using this platform, but we may move into Zoom for CLE and maybe some other things after that. Michelle asks here if anyone has used this remote process for wills and if they could share their experience since the pandemic. So if anyone here has gone through that process or maybe had a colleague who's gone through this process, I think Michelle's asking if anyone could share any thoughts on that.
Well, I would recommend the CLE that was offered, I think, a week or 10 days ago by the Estates and Trust section, where they actually went through a mock signing. And it was a very good presentation. So I would recommend anyone to take a look at that to figure out how to get it done.
And I'll ask Angela or Andrea to just post that link from YouTube in the chat. And that way everyone can click through that when they have time. And, there is a lot of really helpful information, like you said, Morris, on our site through the webinars. And what's great about having it is that if you have a specific issue within a practice area, you can view what you need and always come back to it.
Let me say one thing. Part of the video or the audio was going in and out, and apparently there was some bar on doing things remotely, and I didn't hear all that. If somebody could mention that again. And the other thing, I went to a real estate. There was a real estate settlement, and we'd sold a house. And apparently there's a cottage industry of people. I had to meet the notary in the parking lot of the Home Depot in Upper Marlboro, and we each stayed in our car. And I signed the deed. She notarized it, and we all drove off. And before we drove off, I said, "How long have you been doing this?" She goes, "She started the day before yesterday." But apparently the real estate industry is surviving.
And another thing I would encourage is that as people have experiences, and we've seen these in a lot of the list communities that we have, just, share your experience there. Or, if you have an experience, share it with us, and we'd be glad to communicate that out, whether it's through the Bar Journal or a blog. And I think people are really curious for information. And one of the things I think we can be certain of is that nothing will stay the same. So, sharing our experiences is not to say this is how it's going to always be, but to say this is what I experienced, and this is what worked, and these are maybe some things to consider. So we have a comment here from Jay, who says that my colleague used remote site for a will signing, and my husband and I were witnesses. You may want to contact the colleague, and Jay has provided email information here. So Michelle, if you just look in the chat, you can find that. And I think it's a nice way to connect if you'd like to hear a specific communication. Oh, sorry, Jerry. My apologies. I know we're all other people on our phones and computers. So one of the things that we wanted to open up for discussion to this group is how you are handling meeting with clients or communicating with clients, and thinking of kind of as things reopen, whether it's going back to your office or transitioning to a new business model. And I think we have a really diverse group here of over 20 folks. So I'd encourage anyone who'd like to share their thoughts on that, or have any questions about what's next, to please jump in. And I know we have Andrea on the phone, and something that we have offered is we did have a public health perspective webinar, and we had a representative who spoke about some of those considerations. And I don't know, Andrea, if you like to jump in a little bit more with those details.
Sure. We had Trudy Henson, who's the director of University of Maryland's Public Health and Safety Department. Our president, Dana Williams, heard her speak in another webinar and invited her to address our members. And so we hosted a webinar with her last Monday, and she had a lot of really good information to share about what businesses are going to have to consider as they plan their reopening. And, she started at a kind of 30,000-foot review, and got down into the details, got into the details of everything from timing the opening of the office during the day to manage workflow so that you didn't have so many people in, at the same time in foyers and elevators, and how to guide traffic, traffic flow through a workspace. And so it was very good information, and a little bit different than some of the COVID-related webinars that have really related to substantive and procedural practice in substantive areas of law. And that is available also on our COVID-19 website. And I would really encourage you to take a look at that. It's about a half an hour. And her name is Trudy Henson, again, and she's going to be a resource for us as we continue to put together content for folks as they consider opening up for business again.
And I think, Andrea, something that's so critical to think about is how different our state is within each jurisdiction. And even with the governor's order yesterday, local counties such as Montgomery and Prince George's taking, maybe a little different approach or a little more time to phase in. So I certainly think that with this group, it's a great idea to share what's happening on the ground for you, and thinking about maybe what's going to work for someone else might not work for you. So I'm really glad we have this resource and that she'll be available, Andrea, to us as we continue. And I want to thank, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just wanted to mention is, as far as webinars that we do have coming up, the consumer bankruptcy section is hosting a webinar next week. I just want to give some of the section's activities a quick plug. They're doing a presentation next week on the CARES Act, and that's that legislation's impact on bankruptcy practice. I know the family law section is also planning a webinar on handling domestic violence cases during the pandemic. And we have an economics update, the effect of COVID on the economy in Maryland with Anirban Basu coming up next week. So just wanted to let folks know that we have some other programming coming up.
Thanks, Andrea. Another issue that we've heard a lot of chatter about, and we've certainly communicated about, is the reopening of courts, tentatively scheduled for June 8th here in Maryland. And I think that we'll be receiving some new administrative orders and guidance in the next few days. But one of the things that we wanted to open up for discussion or for questions from this group is, what your thoughts are for reopening, any information that you can share about what's going on in your area, or anything that's just, an idea that you have, or something that you'd like to make sure that the judiciary and administrative judges in the district and circuit and other courts are considering. Because as this is totally unprecedented, what we've heard from above and from judges all around is, please let us know your ideas, because they simply have not ever had to go through anything like this. So I'd really encourage you all in this space, in this time that we have, if you have any thoughts about reopening, to share that here with the group. And in the meantime, go ahead.
Judge Becker here.
Yeah.
I know, what's been happening, at least at Howard County Circuit Court. They've had one judge out of the 5 sitting judges in one day at a time doing the emergency aspects. Bail, most of it's done virtually. Bail hearings, domestic violence, and those types of things. Obviously, June 8th is supposedly the opening date. The last I heard, jury trials are probably not going to start till July 20th. I was interested. I actually was playing tennis with a federal judge out of Baltimore City the other day, and he talked about, just practical problems in their courthouse of, say, using the elevators. I think it's a 5-story courthouse in Baltimore City, if I'm not mistaken, and aspects, if you can only have one person on an elevator at a time, how that may affect a multi-story courthouse, along obviously with with office buildings and so forth. Those kind of practical aspects, I think, are going to have a big impact on. Obviously, it will vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and situation to situation. So it's interesting times, folks. But we'll stay tuned. We'll see.
Thank you, Judge Becker.
It's Phil. I had a similar experience to Lou's in our county. One of our district court employees actually had it, apparently, and they had to deep clean that side of the building. And the same numbers are true for us as to going back. And I know that John Morrissey and they were measuring every district courtroom in Maryland to see how they could socially distance everybody and how many cases they could put in. It's just a logistical challenge of the first order, I think. I'm not going back till June 15th, I think. And then we're going to stage whatever we do. So I think we're going to have a backlog of biblical proportions, is what I'm saying here. Whatever said and done.
Absolutely. And, the district and circuit court work groups have been working really hard to provide these recommendations this week. And we've already heard communicated that it will be a phased reopening. But something that we've been talking about with many of you all is things that we take for granted, right? Just meeting in a sidebar, in a small room before you go into court, things like that we just have to, take a step back and think through how to approach those again. How do I maintain, having time with my client before a hearing? So all of these are things that we're seeing come up in new ways.
The 150-person traffic docket in Hyattsville is a thing of the past, I suspect.
I think so.
While I'm on the line, Stephen Glassman. Something Stephen Glassman was in the Navy Reserve with me.
Well, at least you can just walk up the stairs there. You don't have to go through the elevator.
Right.
Oh, well, thank you for that perspective from both of you all. Has anyone here been going into court physically for any hearings since March? Okay.
We had the same experience in Howard. We have like 3 judges. My English is terrible. I'm sorry. God, my warrior, and I'm just done for here. Yeah, I'm 6 weeks. I don't know how to talk anymore. We had one judge come in to do juvenile matters, one or other emergencies and bail review matters, and that's about it. We're not an MDEC county yet, so it's all paper. And that creates issues as well. One of the biggest problems was getting married. You couldn't get a marriage license. I had at least 3 people call about the marriage license issue, where we didn't really have a statewide rule as to what an emergency was. And getting married sometimes is an emergency. And that was awkward for everybody.
Yeah, if I could chime back in, just I had to get an order that I signed back to Baltimore City, which is not an MDEC jurisdiction, and I ended up mailing it. If I recall, I can't remember now whether I mailed it or emailed it to the law clerk there, who was going to have to walk it down to the courthouse on Calvert Street. So I don't know. You know, the non-MDEC counties, MDEC apparently. I know Judge Cox in Baltimore County, the administrative judge, was just praising MDEC in this pandemic situation as how much it's facilitated operations, at least in Baltimore County. Obviously, a large jurisdiction that's on MDEC.
I know in our courthouse we were phasing everybody. Anybody who could work at home remotely did, and I think we have about 250.
I don't have a space bar on an iPhone.
About 250 people, employees, and they went in groups of divided into thirds and took time going in and socially distance everybody. So I know we're doing that.
At the other end of the life spectrum, the Register of Wills offices have also been backlogged. And it's sometimes also important to have estates probated expeditiously. Houses need to be sold, property taxes need to be paid, etc. And some county register wills have been a little more expeditious than others. They're slowly opening up right now, but that at least for my practice has been another source of frustration. On the public benefit side, there have been a number of federal emergency transmittals by CMS that is helping to expedite the processing of public benefit eligibility. The $1,200 refund check has also been an issue. People who died getting the checks, and IRS now saying they want the money back, and that has been another added layer of bureaucracy in dealing with things.
Or the number of estates, I guess the number of estates will go up dramatically if we have a lot of deaths in Maryland. Is that fair? Fair to say?
Well, yeah. Whenever a person dies, there would be an estate that would be opened up to some degree in most cases.
And dramatically more than what the average is, I guess.
Yeah, presumably.
I remember when Steve Platt and I were orphans court judges, we put in for a pay raise. And one of the delegates goes, "Has the population of the county increased that much?" And then Jerry Devlin, who was on the committee, said, "The question should be, has the population decreased that much that they need a pay raise because they're working that much harder?" We got a little bit of a pay raise.
Maurice, you were mentioning the different Register of Wills offices. Can you talk about any contacts that you've had with any of them directly, or how you've been communicating with them for information?
Well, yeah. Anne Arundel seems to be processing cases. We filed a modified estate closing in Anne Arundel County about a week ago, and they've already reviewed it. So they seem to be moving along. Montgomery County is somewhat slower. I've had some things that were filed right before the virus struck in late February and March, and there hasn't been any action on those matters yet. So things just seem to be different depending on which county you have to deal with.
And I know a lot of them have been responsive on the chat function as well. We saw some of those announcements.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be critical. It's a very tough situation, and the safety of the workers also has to be taken into consideration. It's just a big challenge right now.
Yeah. Angela, do we have any other comments? I just want to make sure I'm acknowledging everyone that's typing and joining us.
No, I don't see any other ones.
Yeah. Okay. Judge Becker, I know you mentioned at the start of this call that you were interested in discussing a little bit about custody issues for military families. Would you like to spend some time on that?
Well, just to reiterate what I mentioned, our game plan for the summit was to do a presentation on the guardianship aspects. I've been involved in a guardianship workshop for about 10 years, and just as an overall comment, in the last couple years, given the aging population that I joined a while back, there's been a lot of emphasis nationally on guardianships and the guardian abuses, both guardians of person and property, et cetera. In the last couple of years, particularly, there's been a work group in the judiciary focusing statewide on the practices involving guardianships and doing surveys about it and finding that the practices vary a good deal. Just to mention, I know at Harrod County with 5 judges, and I had 2 tours. It was a secondary job as the guardianship judge. Fortunately, the first time I had it, the former guardianship judge was still there. So I had a good resource, but in a lot of like 1 judge counties, et cetera, guardianships tended to take a secondary, not the sexiest of areas of the law, if you will. So there's been a concerted effort, both with the Rules Committee and just in terms of best practice aspects to reform and tune up the guardianship process. And I just mentioned that as an overall, comment, in that respect, in terms of lawyers getting appointed, criteria, standards for lawyers getting appointed to represent folks in guardianship situations. There's also a lot more emphasis, and I think you're going to see a lot more of mediation in guardianship situations. There's been some training going on, specifically involving guardianship situations. So I mentioned that as a general proposition. I think I mentioned, as I started to say, I mentioned earlier, in terms of the military side, if soldiers are either getting deployed or they're subject to quick deployment, and particularly if they're single parents, they have to give deployment plans, and part of that, as I understand it, is having a guardianship involved. And while I'm not on top of the specifics, I think in the statute there's a kind of I believe a process for setting up what I'll call a springing guardianship. So if they have to deploy quickly, all the paperwork and so forth is in place for the guardian to function. As I also indicated earlier, there's particularly emergency procedures in place during this COVID aspect, getting folks perhaps out of nursing homes or getting them into appropriate health care on an expedited fashion. And as I understand it, the courts have been geared up to do that virtually.
Thank you. And I know that we've seen something that we've heard from a lot of you is the variety of remote tools that are being used in platforms, whether it's, when you're talking to clients or your peers, if it's Google, Zoom, Skype, but also what we're seeing from the courts and in the different jurisdictions. So, that is an issue that we've expressed to the judiciary and that we've been talking about with many of you. And we're hopeful that we'll get some information about what the next steps will be for those kinds of hearings so that you all can be prepared and also for your clients. Okay. Well, I think that we've addressed the comments that have been in the chats here. We have just a 2 minutes left. And I would just like to say that, we don't want this to be a one-off. And certainly as this continues, even as things reopen, it will be phased. And most of us will likely still be remote. So we would really like to continue to convene this group. And it seemed like a nice joining of the two sections. So we would like to plan that, and we'll reach out to the section chairs. And if there are any topics that any of you would like to discuss, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be sure to include it. We can also have, mini presentations or conversations with specific individuals during these chats if that's helpful to you. But we would certainly like to get together again in June. And just, raise another cup of coffee to each other and wish each other well. We made it another month. And so I thank you all very much. And many thanks to Angela for collecting everyone and putting everyone together.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.